Nepal is a country known for its natural beauty and political turmoil at the foothills of the Himalayas. However, September 2025 marked a turning point in this quiet landscape. Youth movements, social media bans, and years of accumulated economic inequality came together to create a storm that upended the country's political structure. As the streets overflowed, the narrow alleys of the capital Kathmandu echoed with the voices of young protesters. As tension escalated with police and army interventions, on one side stood the remnants of the old government, and on the other, a new generation's demands full of anger and hope. So, how did Nepal reach this point? Were these events solely related to the social media ban, or were they part of a much deeper societal eruption? Back in 2006, during the Maoist insurgency, young people marched the streets, organizing rallies at government buildings. Today's protests, however, have become faster, more organized, and broader due to digital communication and the influence of social media. Nepal's historical process is critically important to understanding modern protests. The country was ruled by a monarchy from the 18th century. In 1990, constitutional reforms brought parliamentary democracy, but political instability continued. The king's assassination in 2001 and the Maoist insurgency in 2006 shook public trust in the political system. For example, during the 1990 democracy movement, people chanted freedom and justice in the streets. Today, young people organize physically due to social media restrictions, repeating history with new methods. The majority of Nepal's population is young, and around 60% of Gen Z use social media. Digital platforms facilitate rapid dissemination of ideas and play a crucial role in organizing the 2025 protests. A university student in Kathmandu began organizing physical meetings with classmates in response to the social media ban, forming the initial core protest group. Within days, thousands of youths joined across the city. Nepal's income distribution was unequal, with low living standards in rural areas and limited access to education and healthcare. For example, a young student living in a village near Pokhara lost access to online education due to internet cuts. This was seen not only as a violation of the right to education, but also as a restriction on access to economic opportunities, increasing participation in the protests. On September 4, 2025, the Nepalese government banned 26 social media platforms, citing illegal activities and disinformation. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and YouTube were shut down. Social media was the most important tool for young people to make their voices heard. The ban was seen as an intervention in digital freedoms, and youths quickly organized. The movement, which began as small street protests, turned into mass protests in the capital and other major cities within days. In downtown Kathmandu, a 20-year-old student leader established a coordination point for thousands of protesters. Here, youths determined protest routes and discussed security measures. While initial demands were just for digital freedom, protesters began to raise issues of government corruption, nepotism, and economic inequality. Protests were now taking place in the streets, in front of government buildings, and on university campuses. A group of protesters unfurled a banner in front of Kathmandu City Hall, chanting equal education, fair governance, sparking similar actions in other cities. The protests quickly spread nationwide. Over 13,500 prisoners escaped from jails, and government buildings were set on fire. The government's passivity and recourse to the military intensified the events. Curfews were declared, but protests continued. At least 30 people died, and over 1,060 were injured in clashes. In Pokhara, clashes between the army and protesters saw protester-erected barricades blocking the city center for 48 hours. Young people bridged the gap between urban and rural areas, spreading the protest movement. Women's and student groups came to the forefront. Leadership was not limited to young men. With social media down, alternative organizing methods emerged. A group of university students held weekly meetings at an old cultural center, maintaining coordination even in areas where social media was banned. On September 9, 2025, Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli resigned and left the country. Many senior officials also stepped down. The army deployed around Parliament to maintain security and held talks with protest leaders who rejected the appointment of an interim prime minister, citing inadequate representation. During negotiations in Kathmandu, young leaders discussed the scope of protest demands and sought assurances for democratic reforms from the army. These events created a power vacuum in Nepal. While the potential for democratic reforms arose, Political leadership struggles and differing visions increased uncertainty. The protests deeply affected the economy and society. The tourism sector suffered serious losses. Tours to Mount Everest were canceled, and the hotel accommodation industry was heavily affected. Businesses reduced production and investment due to security concerns. The social media ban disrupted communication for young entrepreneurs and small businesses. Some tensions rose between ethnic and regional groups. An ethnic group in the Terai region supported the protests and clashed with the central government. Youth political participation increased, and an active civil society movement took shape. Nepal's neighbors India, China, and Pakistan closely monitored the situation. India is concerned about border security and refugee influx, while China wants to limit the regional impact of Nepal's instability. International media reported the youth movements in Nepal, both from the perspective of digital freedoms and democratic demands. India deployed additional security forces along border regions, and China contacted the Nepalese government through diplomatic channels. Experts highlight three possible scenarios. If a compromise is reached between the army and protest leaders, democratic reforms could accelerate, youth could gain more representation in local elections, and influence education policies. If a compromise is reached between the army and protest leaders, democratic reforms could accelerate, youth could gain more representation in local elections, and influence education policies. If the leadership vacuum and conflicts persist, instability will continue in the short and medium term. Security issues at borders may increase, and trade and tourism could be negatively affected. Uncertainty in Nepal may affect border relations with India and regional security. Experts predict that youth will play an active role after this process, and the demands for digital freedom and democratic rights will become permanent. The Gen Z protests in Nepal may seem to have started with the social media ban, but the underlying economic, political, and social problems are profound. Historical fractures, the digital empowerment of youth, and long-accumulated anger made this movement inevitable. This process can reshape Nepal's future. It may give birth to democratic reforms and a new political culture, or it may increase uncertainty and regional risks. But one thing is certain: the young generation has become a decisive force in Nepal's political and social course. And now there's only one message for Nepal's youth. We are the future. Change begins with us. In this video, we discuss the protest process in Nepal, where the youth made history, and their struggle for digital freedom. If you want more content like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share how these events in Nepal affected you in the comments. We are the future. Change begins with us. Like, subscribe, share your comment.